The holiday season is supposed to be a time of reflection and joy, but for me, the week between Christmas and New Year's Day will forever be remembered as the time my family's fragile peace was shattered by a $30,000 betrayal that I never saw coming, despite the red flags that had been waving in my face for years. My name is Alex, and I have spent the last 5 years working 2 jobs and living like a monk to save up $30,000 for a down payment on a house because I wanted to finally escape the orbit of my toxic stepfamily and start a life of my own. But my stepbrother Kyle had other plans for my future. Kyle has always been the golden child in my stepmother's eyes, despite the fact that he is 28 years old with a history of failed startups and a mysterious ability to burn through cash like it's oxygen. And this year he arrived at the family Christmas gathering looking more desperate than usual. But I was too distracted by the holiday chaos to realize that he was sharking my home office. On December 27th, while the rest of the family was out at a festive brunch, I stayed behind to finish some freelance work, and I noticed Kyle lingering by my desk with a look of intense focus that he usually only reserves for gambling apps. And when I asked him what he was doing, he gave me a flimsy excuse about looking for a charger. I didn't think much of it until the next morning when I logged into my high-yield savings account to check the interest, and my heart stopped in my chest because the balance didn't say $30,452, it said $452. The panic that set in was a physical weight, a cold, leaden feeling in my gut that made it hard to breathe as I scrolled through the transaction history and saw a single massive wire transfer to an untraceable offshore crypto exchange that had been initiated at 3 a.m. using my own laptop. I knew instantly it was Kyle, because he was the only person in the house who knew my secondary password, which I had foolishly shared with him months ago when he was helping me set up a secure backup drive, but the sheer audacity of him stealing my entire life savings while I was sleeping in the next room was beyond my comprehension. I ran to his guest room and found it empty. The bed wasn't even made, and his suitcase was gone along with his laptop and the keys to his car, which was no longer in the driveway. And the realization hit me that he hadn't just borrowed the money, he had executed a planned heist and vanished into the gray light of the post-Christmas morning. I immediately called my father and stepmother, who were still at brunch, and their reaction was even more devastating than the theft itself, because instead of being horrified, they started making excuses for him, saying that Kyle probably just had a business emergency and that I was overreacting by calling it a theft. My stepmother actually had the nerve to tell me that family doesn't steal, they share, and that I should wait for him to call and explain himself before I did anything drastic like calling the police. But I knew that every second I waited was a second Kyle was moving my money through digital mixers to make it unrecoverable. I wasn't going to play the role of the victim in his latest drama, so I hung up on them and called the local precinct to report a grand larceny, and as I gave the officer Kyle's physical description and license plate number, I felt a bridge burning behind me that could never be rebuilt. The police officer informed me that because the amount was over $20,000, it was a felony-level offense, and that they would be flagging his passport and his bank accounts immediately, which gave me a small sense of justice, but the hole in my chest where my future used to be was still gaping wide. I spent the next 6 hours in my home office reviewing my hidden security camera footage, a small nanny cam I had installed to watch my dog while I was at work. And there it was in grainy high definition. Kyle sitting at my desk with a flashlight in his mouth, carefully typing on my laptop and looking over his shoulder every few seconds with a sneer of pure greed. He didn't look like a man in a business emergency. He looked like a predator who had finally caught his prey, and watching him systematically drain my life's work was the most forensic proof I could ever have that Kyle was never my brother. He was just a parasite waiting for his moment to strike. By the time the sun went down on December 28th, I was a shell of a person sitting in a dark house surrounded by the remnants of a holiday that had turned into a crime scene, and the only thing keeping me going was the cold promise of legal retribution. The investigation moved faster than I expected because Kyle wasn't nearly as smart as he thought he was, and his vanishing act had left a digital trail a mile wide that the detectives were able to pick up within 24 hours of my report. It turned out that Kyle hadn't just fled the state, he had booked a 5-star suite at a casino resort 3 hours away, using a credit card that he had also stolen from my stepmother's purse, and he was currently living like a high roller on my down payment money. The lead detective called me on December 29th and told me that they had tracked his phone pings to the resort and that they were sending a team to apprehend him. but he warned me that the money was likely already being gambled away at the high-stakes tables, which made me feel sick to my stomach. I spent that night in a state of hypervigilance, responding to a barrage of hateful texts from my stepmother, who was accusing me of trying to put her son in prison over a little money and telling me that she would never forgive me for ruining New Year's for the family. She actually tried to claim that the $30,000 was rightfully hers anyway, because she had contributed so much to my upbringing, which was a total lie since my biological mother's life insurance had paid for everything, and my stepmother hadn't spent a dime on me in 15 years. The level of entitlement was staggering, and it made me realize that Kyle's criminal behavior didn't grow in a vacuum. It was nurtured by a mother who believed that laws were for other people and that her family was entitled to whatever they could grab. When the police finally burst into Kyle's hotel room, they didn't just find my money, they found a literal mountain of evidence of a much larger fraud operation that Kyle had been running for months, including fake ID kits and dozens of stolen credit cards from elderly people in our community. The business emergency my stepmother had defended was actually a desperate attempt to pay off a dangerous group of people Kyle had swindled in a fake investment scheme, and the $30,000 he took from me was just a drop in the bucket of his total debts. The police revealed to me that Kyle had been using my identity to co-sign loans that I never authorized, and that he had been systematically destroying my credit score for over a year by taking out short-term payday loans in my name and then letting them go to collections. My forensic audit of my own life was revealing a total catastrophe that went far beyond a single theft. And I realized that if I hadn't called the police when I did, Kyle would have eventually left me with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and a ruined reputation. My father finally woke up to the reality of the situation when the detectives showed up at his house to question him about his own bank accounts, because Kyle had even managed to siphon money from my father's retirement fund to pay for his offshore servers. The family home was no longer a place of celebration. It was a hub of a criminal investigation, and the golden child was currently being processed into the county jail, while his mother was having a nervous breakdown in the driveway. I felt a strange sense of detachment as I watched the drama unfold from a distance, because I had already mourned the loss of my money and my family, and now I was just focused on the survival of my own future. The detectives told me that because I had the security camera footage and the digital logs, the case against Kyle was airtight, and that he was facing up to 15 years in state prison for multiple counts of identity theft and grand larceny, and for the first time in years, I felt like the air was clear. New Year's Eve was approaching, and while the rest of the world was preparing to celebrate, I was sitting in a lawyer's office filing for a total protective order and initiating a civil suit against my stepmother's estate to recover the lost funds, since she had been the one who provided Kyle with the access codes in the first place. The betrayal was total, but the response was going to be even more absolute. New Year's Eve arrived with a heavy silence that felt more like a beginning than an ending, because as the clock struck midnight, I wasn't at a party or watching the ball drop. I was sitting in my car outside the jailhouse watching my stepmother try to post bail for Kyle using the equity in my father's house. She failed because the judge had set the bail at $250,000 after seeing the scale of his fraud, and the look on her face when she realized her precious boy wasn't coming home for the holiday was the only New Year's gift I needed. My father finally reached out to me on January 1st and told me that he had filed for divorce and that he was moving out of the house because he couldn't live with a woman who had helped her son rob his own stepson and then blamed the victim for the fallout. He apologized for his initial dismissal of the theft and admitted that he had been blinded by the desire for a peaceful life, but that the peace was built on my suffering, and he promised to help me rebuild what Kyle had destroyed. The legal battle is still ongoing, but I have already recovered about $10,000 from Kyle's frozen accounts, and my lawyer is confident that we can claw back the rest through the insurance on my father's homeowner's policy, which covers theft by a resident. Kyle is currently awaiting trial, and the darkest secret the police uncovered was that he had actually been planning to flee to a non-extradition country on New Year's Day with a fake passport and a new identity. And if I had waited even 24 hours longer, he would have been gone forever, and I would have been left with nothing but the debt. My stepmother is now living in a small studio apartment and working 2 jobs to pay for Kyle's defense, but she still refuses to apologize and continues to tell anyone who will listen that I am a selfish monster who put a good man in a cage over a family 10 dispute. I don't care what she says or what the rest of the family thinks, because I have my peace back, and I have the forensic proof that I did the right thing by choosing myself over a group of people who treated me like a bank. I spent the first week of the new year rebuilding my credit and securing my digital life with biometric locks that no one, not even family, will ever be able to bypass, and I am more determined than ever to get that house I was saving for. This experience was a brutal lesson in the fact that blood doesn't make you family, and that holiday spirit is often used as a mask for those who want to take advantage of your kindness when your guard is down. I am starting this year with a clean slate and a cold heart when it comes to people who don't respect my boundaries, and I know that Grandma would be proud of the way I stood my ground and fought for my own legacy. So what do you think? Was I right to press felony charges and destroy the family dynamic over $30,000? Or should I have listened to my stepmother and kept it internal for the sake of the new year? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button if you think Kyle got exactly what he deserved for being a holiday parasite, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Reddit tales of betrayal and justice. See you in the next one.